It says we have to prepare for war with China by 2027. China's not threatening anybody abroad, anybody. China's never, by the way, even once invaded a country overseas. In its whole history of 2,245 years, since 221 BC, and the United States, we've never been at peace. All we do is war. We're playing games here. So, God forbid a nuclear power comes at us. I don't know what's going to happen. I've been to China 100 times at least. There's no intrinsic battle with China, none whatsoever. China's not out to defeat the U.S. It couldn't do so in a million years anyway. We'd all perish. And China's never, by the way, even once invaded a country overseas.
Back to the channel. Well, I'm hoping that you're doing great from wherever you're watching us from. As you know, I'm your host and presenter Geopolitical Stories. Well, I'm hoping that you're doing fine from wherever you're watching us. There's an important video that Jeffrey Sachs shares this and his perspective on US war towards China. Well, actually, I've never heard, or at least hear anywhere, China starting war with any other country or nation. And definitely, the US imperial overreach is something that they have been doing for a long time. Remember, the USA is like that type of student in school or in college who usually just want to fight with everybody. They are always ready for war. Like, that's how they prove their dominance, through the imperial or their military overreach, right? Jeffrey Sachs is a respected economist and foreign policy thinker who has increasingly warned the United States, that the United States is deliberately setting the stage for war with China, not as a response to China's aggression, but as a strategy to preserve its global dominance. In speeches and articles, Sachs highlighted the U.S. military, the Asia-Pacific, the expanding its alliance under the gaze of deterrence, and provoking China through Taiwan, South China Sea maneuvers, and economic sanctions. Jeffrey Sachs also argues that this is not defense, it is an escalation. America sees China not as a military threat, but as economic and ideological competitor that must be contained. Remember sometimes back when people, especially people from the United States, were getting to realize that their whole lives, the things that they are being told have always been a lie. And so as a result, these affected the Americans' perspective and started seeing that really the United States is not great as we used to think. Or rather, it is China that is great, as we used to think, because they're trying to look at the amount they usually pay for their healthcare system, and the amount people in China pay for the healthcare system. And also remember the tariff wars that was happening between China and the United States, specifically China and the United States. You get to understand that China retaliated towards it, removing all the middlemen, and this was affecting the United States business-wise. So the fights that China and USA have always been having has been economic and ideological competitor. When we look at the beliefs of how China resolves conflict and how the USA chooses to solve conflict, is totally different. And so I want to take, it's around 10 minutes video. I want us to take a minute and watch this video, and then we'll come back and discuss about these issues in a broader perspective. If you're watching us for the first time, I'll ask you to subscribe to the channel, join our membership, and get to see what I can offer you. But until then, let's watch the video. I'll be back, and then I'll be sharing my thoughts at the end of it all.
In its whole history of 2,245 years, since 221 BC, when the Qin Empire unified China, did they ever invade Japan? Not once. Did they ever invade Korea? Not once. Did they ever invade Vietnam? Yes, 17 years in that 2,000 years. Actually, 17 years in 1 month. 1420 to 1436, and then 1 month in 1979. And the United States, we've never been at peace. All we do is war. And you know what the truth is? We learned it from here. Because the British Empire was the most militarized society imaginable. And unfortunately, the leaders of this country, and it turns out not to matter which party, because Starmer is as bad as Boris Johnson, all they know is military. It's unbelievable. What's the first thing that Starmer does when he becomes prime minister? He goes to Kiev to pledge the endless support of the U.S., by the way, because Britain doesn't do anything. The endless support of the United States to the defeat of Russia. So what is this democracy versus dictatorship? Come on. These are not even sensible terms. And even if they were sensible terms, under the UN Charter, we can have our democracy. You do what you want. It happens to be the case that China has had a centralized administrative state for 2,245 years, ever since Emperor Qin Shi Huangdi unified the Qin dynasty. There have been a few periods of disintegration of the dynasties, but if you look through the Qin, the Han, the Tang, the Song, the Ming, the Qing, till today, till the PRC, this is the same structure, by the way. This is an administrative state ruling over almost the same region, by the way, for more than 2,000 years. So, by the way, it has been wondrously effective for a long time at keeping the internal peace. China's only wars were nomadic invasions from the steppelands in the north. And then one crazed, then the Mongols invading, that's part of that, and one absolutely crazed shogun in the 1590s trying to take over China, and he made it as far as Korea and was killed. Other than that, this has been actually exceptional statecraft until Britain had the genius idea of fighting a war to sell opium in China in 1839, one of the most noble efforts imaginable. That started the modern era of China. So I don't buy it at all. But even if it were true, it's illegal under international law, unwise, and, look at the great accomplishment of pouring in, I don't know how many hundreds of billions of dollars into Afghanistan for 20 years to get from the Taliban regime to the Taliban regime. This is American genius at democracy promotion. They don't care at all about democracy, by the way, at all. They topple governments they don't like that won't do their bidding. They topple democracies if they don't like them. They'll topple anybody that they don't like. That's how it's worked all along. They never said, oh, we can't topple Mossadegh in 1953. He's a democratic government. No, they toppled a democratic government in Iran and put in a police state, which led to wonderful long-term relations with Iran because they really love the American people for that. So this is not about democracy. This is a game, and it's a terrible game, and it's a secret game, and it's played by the CIA, which is the most important agency in the United States, because they have complete secrecy, complete unaccountability. There was one review of the CIA 49 years ago, the Church Committee, and nothing since then. And as one of our CIA directors, they're all, I was going to say one of the worst, but they're all the same by the time they get there, or by the time they leave there, because the agency takes them over. Pompeo said, as he was proudly explaining the role of the CIA to some Texas students a few years ago, and you can find it online, he said, what do we teach at the CIA? To lie, cheat, and steal. And that's a pretty good encapsulation of the methodology. And that is a very dangerous world being created that way. So China's not going to turn the U.S. into a dictatorship. Maybe the U.S. will turn into a dictatorship. Maybe it will just turn into a plain old plutocracy. Maybe it will turn into a military-industrial state as the complete dominance. I don't know. But it's not going to come from China. It's going to come from inside. That's where our risk is. We're playing games here. So, God forbid a nuclear power comes at us. I don't know what's going to happen. But we came at them. And we should stop going after China and Taiwan. It's not our goddamn business. Taiwan is part of China. The Taiwanese said it in the Republic of China. The People's Republic of China said it. We agreed to it in countless communiques when we made diplomatic relations with China. So what the hell are we doing sending armaments to Taiwan unilaterally, having our speakers of the House go to Taiwan, inviting a disaster in the future, having publications like you can read now, it's worth looking at. The Navy just issued a plan about 3 weeks ago. It says we have to prepare for war with China by 2027. It doesn't say we'll have a war with China. It says we have to prepare for war with China by 2027. We are not playing a video game. They're playing with your futures. It's completely unbelievable to me. China's not threatening anybody abroad, anybody. And even the South China Sea disputes over these shoals, where China's putting on some armaments, that's because if you read the first page of U.S. military doctrine, it is to create choke points in China's sea lanes. China's not interested in a few rocks. It's interested in not having the U.S. block its sea lanes. That's all. We have to understand the most basic points. Stay out of each other's lane so that we don't end up all dead. It's not so hard. And by the way, if you study another game theory structure, and it's quite interesting for you to do for people who are formal analysts. If you study the hawk-dove game, or the game of chicken, as it's sometimes called, which says, if the other side threatens a nuclear war, don't get into a nuclear war. But if they're being dovish, you threaten to scare the wits out of them. But if both sides collide, then we have nuclear Armageddon. If you study that game formally, and there's a payoff structure for it, and you put, as I suggest, a minus infinity in the quadrant of hawk-hawk, then the equilibrium solution is dove-dove. Okay? The mixed strategy is to put 0 probability on playing hawk. Because when you multiply minus infinity times any finite probability, positive probability, you get minus infinity. And so the logic is don't play chicken with nuclear arms.
Hello guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm glad that we have people that are addressing these geopolitical issues that are happening around the world, because in one way or another, it's affecting you as a citizen, and it's also affecting everyone in the world. Remember, China stands as one of the most productive, countries in the world, right? A lot of products that we see outside there, most of them you see, especially electronics, that are made in China. So the shoes that we wear, all these Nike products, all these Jordan that people wear around here are all made from Chinese. So China really stands as one of the most productive countries, and this poses a threat to the United States, because while they realize that they don't have that much economical power as compared to the United States, as compared to China, this makes them find a way of flexing their dominance by planning to start a war with country like China, right? Let's talk about China's historical non-imperial posture. One of the key points Sachs emphasizes is that China historically has not pursued global conquest in the same way European colonial powers or the US. For thousands of years, China remained focused on internal governance, trade, and defending its borders rather than engaging in overseas invasion. Unlike Britain, France, Spain, or the US, which all built empires through force, China's expression was continental and defensive. Even today, it has one overseas military base in Djibouti, while the US maintains 800 plus foreign bases. Sachs underscores that portraying China as a military aggressor is historically inaccurate and ideologically driven. But those are games that the United States like playing, right? Paint you as a bad person, then the next day they snap on you. That's the way they did to Iran. Even though Iran had nothing to do with whatever the United States was thinking. Let's talk about the US military industrial complex needs an enemy. Sachs points out to the military industrial complex as a powerful driver behind America's preparation for war. Remember, after the Cold War, the US needed new threat to justify its massive military budget, and China fit the bill. Companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Northrop Grumman profit enormously from tension and fear. The rise of China as an economic power has been framed as a military challenge to keep these industries flush with contracts. Sachs argues that the narrative of China threat is less about genuine scrutiny and more about sustaining war based on capitalism and a unipolar military order. Talk about Taiwan, the spark point engineered by Washington. The US continues to escalate tensions around Taiwan, a territory that China considers part of its sovereignty. For decades, US policy followed the One China policy, recognizing Beijing as the official government while quietly supporting Taiwan's autonomy. Recently, however, the US has made away from strategic ambiguity and openly visited and supported Taiwan in ways China sees as hostile. Sachs emphasizes that China is not invading Taiwan. It is reacting to increasing provocation. He argues the US is using Taiwan as a geopolitical chess piece, similar to how it has weaponized Ukraine's NATO aspiration to provoke Russia. Right. Also, let's talk about China's economic rise as a threat to the US hegemony. The arguments that Sachs gives is the fact that the US cannot tolerate a multipolar world, and the global trade partnership. Remember, China's economic success was built on infrastructure, manufacturing, and global trade partnerships, which challenges the US-led global order. Initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative signals a shift in global influence from west to east. Sachs believes that the US views this shift as existential, rather than compete economically or diplomatically. Washington is leaning into military power to contain China. This is not unlike the Cold War strategy, but this time the enemy is not ideologically communist but economically efficient. That's how they see China. Talk about Indo-Pacific militarization and the AUKUS Pact. The US has expanded its military footprint in the Indo-Pacific through pacts like AUKUS, that's Australia, UK, US, and Quad, that's the US, India, Japan, Australia. It is building bases in Philippines, increasing naval patrols near Chinese waters, and selling billions in weapons to regional allies. Sachs warns this is not defensive, it is an encirclement strategy. China, witnessing these moves, is understandably defensive, but the Western media portrays any Chinese military development as an aggression. Sachs critiques this hypocrisy. The country with global military dominance is accusing the one surrounded of being the aggressor. They are provoking you, and when you try to act, not like literally act, but when you try to protect yourself, then there comes the problem again. You're now being portrayed as the aggressor. I'd like to talk about the role of American propaganda and media. Sachs highlights how the US mainstream media manufactures public consent for war. Through selective reporting, think tank-funded op-eds, and fear-mongering headlines, Americans are conditioned to view China as a looming threat. Rarely does mainstream coverage offer context on China's security concerns or its long-standing interventionist foreign policy. This one-sided narrative ensures that when conflict arises, the public blames China. Sachs sees this as a repeat of Iraq and Afghanistan, where the American people were misled into supporting war based on distorted truths and deliberate fear campaigns. Also, this goes ahead and talks about the danger of miscalculation and unwinnable war. According to Sachs, a war with China will be catastrophic, not just morally, but materially. China is not Iraq or Libya. It is a nuclear-armed superpower with massive economy and technological capabilities. Any direct confrontation, especially over Taiwan or in the US-China Sea, could spiral into global war. Sachs argues that the US is playing a dangerous game of brinkmanship. Unlike previous interventions, this one cannot be won through force. The assumption that China will back down ignores this Chinese nationalism, historical trauma from Western imperialism, and strategic patience. I'll say why China isn't the aggressor and what it actually wants. So, Sachs insists that China's primary goal is to develop, not to dominate. The Communist Party legitimacy depends on economic growth and internal stability, not foreign occupation. China's global strategy centers around infrastructure, that's the BRI, technological innovation, AI, 5G, and regional stability. It wants trade, not war. Sachs notes that Beijing has called for diplomacy, multilateralism, and even restraint in times of crisis. It has not invaded any other country in 40 plus years. Painting China as warmonger serves US propaganda, but it does not align with China's historical behavior or current interests. Lastly, Sachs' final warning wants America to choose diplomacy or disaster. The choice is theirs. Jeffrey Sachs warns that unless the US shifts from confrontation to cooperation, it's manufacturing its own medicine. A war with China will devastate the global economy, isolate the US, and accelerate the collapse of its moral and political legitimacy. Sachs urges American leaders to abandon Cold War thinking, invest in diplomacy, and end military provocations, and accept a multipolar world where China has a rightful place. His message is clear. America doesn't have to fall, but it will if it continues to provoke conflict with a nation that does not want war. I'm your host and presenter, Geopolitical Stories. If you're watching us for the first time, kindly consider subscribing to the channel, join our membership. I really get to see what it can offer you. But until then, peace love, and harmony. Salute.